We have to pay for the infrastructure of this greening of the grid because our current grid can't accommodate the intermittent wind and solar, which I think ultimately doesn't end well for any of us.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to podcast for all things energy and environmental policy and politics in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman. My co-host Amy Cooke is with me in studio today, and we're here to do a special edition of PowerGab because the Colorado General Assembly just wrapped up its 2024 legislative session. Yeah, round of applause for that. Thank God it's finally over.
It's over.
But, you know, in the time that they were there, the 120 days that they were in session, energy and environmental politics once again played a major role, as it has in the last several years. And so to kick things off, we're going to send it over to Amy because she wrote about a particular bill that passed, Senate Bill 218, and it's got her pretty fired up. So if you want to tell us why.
Yeah, you know, this is one of those that it's a little bit of a burr in my saddle.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that when I was doing energy and environmental policy at the Independence Institute, I spend a lot of time talking about Xcel Energy and how they profiteer off the backs of captive ratepayers. But what I didn't do then quite so much was point out who is responsible for creating that environment by which they can actually profiteer. And SB 218, which we have dubbed, or at least I have dubbed, and you know what, now anybody in my presence is going to have to say the Fenberg Rider, because that's what it is. It is a rider thanks to Steve Fenberg. So if you remember a year ago, or a little over a year ago, Steve Fenberg said that he was concerned about rising rates after winter of 2022, when there were some there were some power issues throughout the country. The price of natural gas went up, and the cost of heating our homes went way, way up. Well, he was concerned, and I literally will use that in air quotes because it was kabuki theater. They put on a good show about being concerned. Only this year to pass SB 218. And by the way, I actually have the list of people who said no in the state Senate, who actually defied him in the state Senate. But here's what it will do. Steve Fenberg acknowledged that the load in Colorado, meaning the amount of electricity that will be needed to meet demand in the state of Colorado, is going to go up. And we know that. We have said that. And he said, well, you know, the load's going up, so we're going to have to pay to, you know, essentially build the infrastructure. What he leaves out of that is that he's responsible, he and his fellow Democrat lawmakers, and there are a few Republicans in there, but they are responsible for increasing the load. Why? Because of the Polis plan. So yes, we're playing the name game. The Polis plan is the complete electrification of the state of Colorado. We did an entire series about this and what that will cost. So this is just the first rider, which of that we expect will be many. It's the Fenberg Rider. It's to pay for distribution. It's a particular part of the infrastructure. I won't bore you with the details on that. But when you go to your Xcel Energy bill, and I would encourage you to do so, and if you've got old ones, compare them, because I think this might be rider number 10, maybe rider number 11. This is it's a blank check. What Steve Fenberg and those who voted yes on this bill, what they have essentially given is Xcel a blank check to charge us, you know, Xcel ratepayers, to pay for this distribution system. Now, why would they want a rider instead of a rate case? Well, in a rate case, if they bake it into what they call, your electric rates, if they bake it into that, they have to go justify themselves in front of the PUC in every single rate case. If you get a rider, they don't have to justify themselves. It is simply they're recovering the cost, and the legislature, thanks to Steve Fenberg, is giving them this blank check, the go-ahead permission to collect from Xcel Energy ratepayers. So whatever it costs, that's what we're all going to be paying. And that's why I say it's super important that we know who's responsible for creating the environment by which Xcel profits off of our electricity.
You made a couple great points that I want to hit on there because you said whatever it costs, and that's a key thing. No one knows what this is going to cost yet.
Nope.
There was no estimate attached to the bill. The legislators that supported it didn't say this is what we think it's going to cost. It just says, Xcel, you shall do this. You shall recover the costs. It needs to happen. So whatever it's going to cost, it's going on your bills. And then the other thing is, yes, it's important to know, connect the dots for when that charge shows up, what caused it. Because to date, you hear all the time from the Democrats down there and Governor Polis and sometimes the Republicans as well. Oh, this, greening the grid and the energy transition, it's actually saving you money. It's, these policies are saving you money. It's the fossil fuels that are increasing your energy bills. And this is one example that we can point back to and say, well, this was a direct legislative choice spurred by a particular policy goal, which is to support electrification of EVs and home heating, directly spurred by that will necessarily increase your energy bills.
And the reason why I want to put names on it, Jake, is because we have term limits here in Colorado, in the legislature, and of course in the governor's mansion. Now, remember, complete electrification is with using wind, solar, and batteries is supposed to happen by 2040. Well, Jared Polis will be far from the governor's mansion. The people in the legislature who have voted for this, those people will be gone as well.
Yep.
So I am old enough to remember when Max Tyler said, wind and solar, it'll create jobs and it's free. What's not to love? So, and he's gone. Nobody remembers that except for those of us who, minds like steel traps who won't let it out. So I will never forget that because we were told it was going to save us money and it won't. And this is, I think, the first of what will be very many riders in the future because they're not going to want to go through a rate case on that. And ultimately, the series which you authored and the Energy Bad Boys did the modeling, and we had them on the show talking about it. This is just one tiny piece of what could be hundreds of billions with the B dollars. So this Fenberg Rider is the first of what we anticipate will be many.
Yeah, and just one quick point before we move on to some of the other bills I want to hit on. It's not as though, maintaining the distribution grid isn't an important thing, right?
No, that's right.
We saw just a couple weeks ago that distribution blackouts can occur. The folks that lost their power, not from Xcel's preemptive shutoff, but some of the folks that lost it because wind kicked up, that's a distribution failure. So Maintaining the distribution grid is important, but it's one thing to do so based on organic needs. You need to repair something or population goes up because people move to Colorado, so you need to build it out. But when you're explicitly doing it for political ends, that's when I think you're totally justified in calling this out. You need to tie it to the fact that the legislature said, Xcel, you shall do this. Xcel, you shall profit, and captive ratepayers, you shall pay for it.
That's exactly, and on that, you're absolutely right about we need to maintain the grid, and it needs, there needs to be investment in that. This investment is in particular because our current grid can't accommodate the intermittent wind and solar, that weather dependent, I actually called it couture, resource. And the reason why I say that, it's the equivalent of dumping your Toyota Camry that you have, and it might be 8 or 9 years old and it's got 90,000 miles, but it's perfectly good and it's paid for and everything, but you're going to get rid of it and instead you're going to replace your family car with a DeLorean. That's what this reminds me of. And so now we have to pay for this. We have to pay for the infrastructure of this greening of the grid, which I think ultimately doesn't end well for any of us.
Certainly, as we've seen with this, it certainly is going to end up with energy bills going up.
So hashtag Fenberg Rider.
But moving on from the Fenberg Rider bill, that was the electricity side of things at the Capitol this session. Oil and gas also featured pretty prominently. PowerGab viewers probably saw our previous episodes covering the attempt to outright ban the industry by 2030. We had Senator Barbara Kirkmeyer on for that. Those bills and related bills actually got scrapped at the last minute because of some behind the scenes maneuvering from, I guess, Governor Polis was involved and the industry itself, or at least a handful of select players in the industry that got to be at the table.
Right.
And then some environmental groups hashed out a little deal where they're going to get rid of all the ballot initiatives that were being proposed, of which there were several. The temporary seasonal ban on oil and gas, that's gone. And now oil and gas production gets a special new fee that's going to fund the governor's trains. So how about that? How about that?
We're going to use oil and gas money to fund their electric mass transit.
Yeah. What struck me about this, and I certainly wasn't the only one to point this out, I think I saw Senator Pelton maybe say something similar, but to me it reads like a protection racket almost.
Right.
You spend 3 months of the session saying we're going to put you out of business. The environmental community says we're going to introduce ballot measures to put you out of business. But if you are willing to pay us a fee, you get to stay around.
Right,
as long as that fee keeps coming and you fund my train.
It's like, yeah, the mafia would be proud.
I know it sounds a little hyperbolic, but that's exactly what came to my mind is that we'll leave you alone as long as you kick some up to the big guy.
Yeah. Who's the big guy?
That's right.
The big guy in Colorado.
It's Governor Polis and the fee breakdown. So SB 230 is the bill that imposes the new fee. And it stipulates in that legislation that 80% of that fee revenue shall go to transit projects. And not only just transit projects, there's a specific piece of language that says RTD will finish the fast tracks, the long promised fast tracks line to guess where? Boulder. Guess where? Guess who lives in Boulder?
Guess who has constituents in Boulder? Yep. You know what? I would almost guess that Steve Fenberg may be looking also to do a statewide campaign of some kind.
Yeah,
along with our attorney general once Polis is out of office.
Yeah, it's quite possible, but it's just so transparent what this became. Obviously, they wanted to avoid the messy ballot fight and some of the contentious pieces of legislation. I get that, but the compromise that they hashed out puts a new fee, one on oil and gas, which means we get to pay more for oil and gas as consumers. It also disadvantages smaller oil and gas producers because guess who was invited in that compromise discussion? It was all the big majors, the oil and gas majors that said, sure, I guess we can stomach a little bit of a fee on our production, but.
Also not in there? Just consumers?
Yeah, no.
Consumers are never in those stakeholder meetings.
No.
Oh, another one of my least favorite words. A couple of things on this. One is that I don't understand why the oil and gas industry isn't fighting back on this stuff. Like at some point you have to realize I don't mean to pick on Fenberg or to highlight him, but he said so much stuff that everybody needs to know. It was about 2018 maybe, may have been 2017. He said in a town hall he wants to end the extraction industry in Colorado. When somebody says something like that, I believe them.
Right.
When you say it to a group of your constituents, I believe that that's where you want to go. And so to me, if I'm the oil and gas industry, you better start fighting like your life depends on it. I mean, that's also coming from Weld County. I look at it and go, those are my people. Those are friends, family, neighbors. They go to church with us. They're in the grocery store. It's their livelihood too. And then the other thing on this, and I think this is really a reflection of sort of the who's in charge in Colorado. They have such a parochial view on energy production. So they want to shut down oil and gas and we don't want this happening in Colorado. Climate change, except for the fact that oil and gas is a global commodity.
Absolutely.
What you've essentially just done is made affordable, reliable, and dare I say cleaner energy. You've made it less accessible to people in third world countries. Don't tell me you care about human rights or the rights of women when you want to shut down an industry that is responsible for improving the lives of the least among us.
And it's a simple fact that, to your point, global demand for this stuff, as much as a lot of things are changing on the ground in the United States, global demand for this stuff is only going up. The United States Energy Information Administration, which is the federal government's own repository of this stuff, says as much. Through 2050, they project global demand for American fossil fuels is going to go up. So anytime you try to put out a productive industry in Colorado, I think you made a great point. We do it cleaner than most other places. You're only, one, impoverishing communities like Weld County. You're taking jobs away from a state like Colorado. But two, you're starving the world of a much needed energy resource.
And I think Colorado is going to find themselves, I know they think of themselves as cutting edge. I think they're going to find themselves as an outlier. Prices are going to continue to skyrocket. Demand is going to go up as well as we electrify everything, and reliability is going to go down. In Colorado will even be, and this is my prediction, will be find itself in even a more perilous position than, say, California or Illinois, which at the very least have a little bit of nuclear.
No,
actually, Illinois has a lot.
Yeah, they do have a lot of it.
Yeah, they do. But Colorado refuses to even entertain it. So.
Yeah, no, it's really a Gordian knot they're tying themselves into,
Yep.
where they're shrinking the amount of available resources to power the electric grid while also trying to snuff out this productive fossil fuel extraction industry.
And expand the load at
Yeah.
the exact same time. And the people who are doing it won't be in the legislature when the real proverbial stuff hits the fan.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And I'll link SB 30 in the show notes for folks that want to dig through the details, because the way they get this fee is actually really convoluted, and it's tailored to the price of oil and gas at a given time. So I'll let folks, we won't get into that nerdy stuff here on the show, but I'll definitely link that so people can check it out. But one last bill we wanted to touch on was the local siting of renewable energy projects. There was a big rumor at the early onset of the legislative session that they were going to do similar to what Michigan did, and the state was going to step in and say local communities no longer have control over siting of wind and solar projects. We've actually had a little bit of a development on that front where it didn't quite end up that way.
So how did it end up?
So the final language of the bill that passed was the Colorado Energy Office, which is an executive agency, will create a repository of model local government language where it will encourage the siting of renewables, but it won't be a mandate, and they'll send it around to local communities and say, if you want to adopt it, feel free to adopt it. But they're no longer going to try to preempt local control over this stuff. So definitely a big change. I think it was going to be one of the major fights of the legislative session if they really were going to push forward with stripping local governments of control of this stuff. That's already been a major theme in other policy areas, which we won't get into here, but I think they shied away from that fight.
So I'm curious on this, and we're just speculating. That's the beauty of being us. You know, we can speculate on occasion. I mean, that's what we do. I am curious, what municipalities do you think may have been most upset about siting of some of these utility scale projects?
If I had to guess, probably Eastern Plains folks and maybe Southern Colorado folks, because that's where, the Eastern Plains is where the most rich wind resources are. And they've embraced wind at times, but those folks are also proud of their local community. They're proud to be in charge of things that affect them. And I don't know this for a fact, but if I had to guess, I would assume it was those communities where they know that the state would like to stick their renewables there, but they would like to have the final say as to whether or not that makes sense for them.
And I will add one more thing to that too. You can still use your land when there is wind. You can still, the footprint of a wind turbine is huge, and you all, anybody who knows me knows I'm not a fan of wind, of industrial wind. But you can still use your land.
Yeah.
If you have solar if you're doing acres and acres, hundreds of acres of farmland for solar panels, you've restricted the use of your land to nothing but a solar farm.
Yeah.
I was also wondering too, and I didn't look it up, so I probably need to look it up, if there were some of the more, let's say, more expensive enclaves in Colorado that may not have wanted those sited in their open space.
Yeah, that would not shock me at all for the run-of-the-mill NIMBYs to come in and say, well, we want all this stuff, but just keep it out of my community. Don't ruin my views. Stick it over there for other people to deal with.
And I think the other thing on this too is that it goes to show you that local control is great until it's your project or your pet project, and then it's not great.
Yeah, that's one of my pet peeves about the legislature lately. It's total Calvin ball. The rules
Yeah.
change whenever it suits them. Local control is either sacrosanct or it's a terrible thing that we need to get rid of and run roughshod over. So it totally is just a whim, a political whim.
Right.
Sorry.
No. I'm saying that's exactly it. I mean, we went through the local control issue with the oil and gas wars.
Yep.
And by the way, the idea that the oil and gas wars are over, that truce didn't last long.
I was going to say, how many years now have we heard that, this is the final truce that will hold it together?
One.
I think we're at 3 truces now.
Yeah,
so.
They don't hold up well.
Yeah, place your bets as to whether or not that'll continue.
Right.
But, as we're coming up on time here, Amy, I want to kick it over to you for our usual wrap-up segment. What do we want to leave people with at the end of this legislative session?
So when you see a new rider on your bill, on your Xcel Energy bill, no, it may have an acronym, and I think it's GMCA, just know it's the Fenberg Rider. Just hashtag Fenberg Rider. I don't think they'll use the acronym FR, but that's what we'll use. It's the Fenberg Rider. Also, to something we said earlier, local control is whatever, it's local control for me, not for thee.
Yeah.
It's for whomever is in charge. And then this is not going to get better. I hate to tell you that. So get a generator.
Get a generator. Good advice as always. But that does it for us for another episode of the PowerGab podcast. If you enjoyed what you watched here, feel free to tune into the rest of our episodes over at IITV on YouTube, or you can check us out wherever you get your podcasts audio format. And if you enjoy the stuff we do here and you want to suggest future show topics or guests, feel free to reach out to us at PowerGab, info@powergab.org. That's it. Yeah.
It's not easy.
Came to me eventually. And then we release new episodes every week, so stay tuned on those. But until next week, we'll see you.